Archaeologist unearths strange statues in jungle, burst into tears when he realizes what it is. As an archaeologist, John had spent most of his life exploring ancient parts of the world, however. His latest find was unlike anything he'd ever seen before, deep in the heart of the jungle. This discovery was going to change his life forever. To find his next hunt, he combed through history books and investigated several locations. Then he would go alone to the location to see if his forecasts were accurate, which they frequently were. He came across a secret clearing as he was exploring the jungle in search of the site he had picked. He knew this was the spot to start excavating right away, and not long after, he discovered something. John knelt down and used his fingertips to remove a coating of sand. As he brushed more, the strange objects buried underneath the sand became visible. It was a round object of some sort with a smooth surface, but as he brushed deeper, he noticed it was way bigger than he anticipated. The object reached deep beneath the ground, and John quickly realized he had stumbled upon something unique. There were 3 other objects that the radar also picked up. This might be the find of a lifetime for John, who couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had pitched his tent a little to the side and over the area where the things were. He would never leave the place without uncovering every artifact. John meticulously recorded the first discovery, taking measurements, photos, and careful notes in order to uncover the remaining things. The statues were arranged in a circle, 3 facing each other and 1 facing away from the others. But when John examined the statues more intently, he started to feel uneasy. The features of the statues were engraved with emotions that were disturbing and strangely familiar. There was something strange about them that John couldn't quite place. Soon it was completely dark outside because the sun had already begun to set. John had to arrange for a truck to arrive at his site the following day by getting in touch with the base camp as soon as he could. The next day, John eagerly awaited the arrival of the truck from his base camp. He had spent a restless night pondering the strange energy surrounding the statues. There was something about their resemblance, their energy, and the haunting familiarity in their expressions that continued to intrigue him. The truck finally arrived, and John was joined by a group of helpers to carefully raise and secure all 4 of the sculptures for transfer as the rumble of an engine finally shattered the calm of the jungle. Back in the lab, John ordered everyone to go home after a long hour of travel to get some rest. This was his discovery, after all, and he didn't want other people to get in the way. First, he used a magnifying glass to examine the statue. John didn't know where he had seen the statue's material before, but it had an eerily familiar feel to it. He made the decision to sample. To identify the statue's material, he used a cotton swab to clean it, then processed the sample in the machine. Realizing he hadn't stopped for food since they'd left the forest that morning, he made the decision to go on his break throughout that process. Dinner was soon to be served. As he ate his sandwiches, the processing machine finished. John put the last bite in his mouth and walked over to the computer to look at the results. But he almost choked when he saw what the statues were made of. He coughed and ran to the table for a sip of his water. He read the results over and over, thinking something would change or an error would pop up, but nothing changed. The results were final, and there was nothing John could do about them. He had never come across something made out of this material before. John made the decision to X-ray the statue. He carefully positioned the statue on a mobile table before wheeling it into the X-ray room. It wasn't safe for him to remain inside, so he had to observe from behind a glass pane. There, he set up the machine and left the room. Looking at the X-ray, John's jaw fell, unable to control his happy feelings any longer. John broke down on his knees and started crying. The realization that the statues were actually petrified artifacts of the ancient tribe that had once lived in the bush hit him with devastating intensity. The realization that these monuments were not made out of aesthetic aspiration or adoration but rather out of a desperate attempt to preserve the memory of those whose existence had been erased from history and whose stories had been hushed for all time was like a stab to the heart. John knew that his own journey as an archaeologist had taken on a deeper purpose, to honor the past and build a world where every voice, no matter how ancient, would be cherished and remembered.